My name is Chris Knight with WRFI Community Radio News. I'm here in Ithaca, New York at Cornell University, where more than 100 protesters against natural gas drilling have gathered in response to a unexpected visit by Governor Andrew Cuomo. Governor Andrew Cuomo is making an appearance here in Ithaca to promote his new Startup New York program, which would give tax breaks for new businesses starting up around SUNY campuses. But these protesters here have a different objective and a different message in mind.
Don't frack our water, don't frack our water, don't frack our water, leave it alone.
My name is Bill Hecht. I'm a geologist. I've drilled and fracked gas wells, and I was a farmer. I've farmed over 2,000 acres. I'm totally against fracking as it stands right now, but mainly because New York State DEC is underfunded and undermanned. And the way people are looking to fund that is through a tax on production and increasing permit fees. Those are both good ideas, but both those, from my own personal experience, will be used against you by the drillers.
So maybe can you explain how that process works?
Say that the state right now has a golden opportunity to fund whatever they want in DEC for this oversight. And we're going to need oversight for old wells and vertical wells, whether something goes ahead or not. If they increase the permit fees, gas prices are down, they just don't drill. Then you've got no money coming in. If they want to put the screws to you, which a guy in Western New York did it within the last year or so, you just shut the valves off, or you do a rolling brownout by IOGA, the independent oil and gas producers, of just shutting wells down field by field. It wouldn't be a drop in the bucket of prices, but it would put a tremendous financial pressure on people that are depending on royalty checks. It would put a tremendous financial pressure on the state who is expecting to get their funding that way. So the only way around that I can see is to put a tax on each acre of each lease. A tax on each acre of each lease, plus increasing permit fees. But to put your eggs all in one basket of expecting a steady stream of income over the next 50 or so years on increasing permit fees and tax on production, it's going to come back and bite you really hard.
So then, I guess, what do you say to the people who will say that fracking's a really good idea to boost our economy in that it will provide us with all these jobs and
They won't provide diddly jobs locally. They're going to bring in their own people. That's another whole issue. My issue is trying to get across to people and prepare that in some form this may go forward. And even if it doesn't go forward, as I said, they're still going to need money for oversight for the vertical wells, the old abandoned wells from the 30s, and literally I've seen wells in Cuyahoga County drilled back in 1865. There's a lot of rotting old wells out there that need oversight, and the way the state's really not talking about how to fund it. And these people aren't either. Even if drilling is totally cut off, and we are 100% renewable in New York State, you're still going to have to deal with the old wells and many other problems. And how are you going to fund it with a steady stream of income?
You're talking about just the maintenance of all of these wells that are already drilled, and the vertical ones being planned to be drilled?
The vertical wells that have been drilled, the vertical wells that have been abandoned, the vertical wells that are being drilled now, will be in the future. And probably there'll be some horizontal drilling allowed on an experimental basis, exploratory wells. They are not equipped financially or manpower-wise, the DEC, to handle this. And they're not addressing how to finance it.
Yeah, and we're kind of seeing this, recently in Wyoming, there was that EPA study into the
which they just abandoned.
Effects, and they just abandoned that whole study.
Yeah, very suspicious.
And so do you kind of see something similar like that happening for us in New York?
Oh,
having
certainly.
The oversight being put back in the hands of state regulators, where it's more subject to manipulation by corporate interests?
It's already in the hands of state regulators, the DEC, and they are not on top of it, and haven't been for 30 years. Their ranks have been decimated financially. There's some very good people in DEC that would like to do their job, but they don't have the funding to do it.
And so then, I guess, where do we go from here? Then what's the...
As I said, we have a golden opportunity to fund anything we want if we would tax each acre of each lease. And you just say, well, gee, I'm just pulling a figure out of the hat. We need $50 million for hydrologists, limnologists, geologists, hydrogeologists, lab tests for baseline studies, computers, oversight, secretarial, the whole schmear. You need 50 million. We've got so many acres of leases. We're setting the tax at this rate. Just like a town or village or county does. We have these expenses. We set the tax rate to finance what we need. If the companies decide to sell off leases, you up the tax rate. It just takes the governor to have some guts, and the DEC. Well, it's really up to the governor. It's not the DEC's job. They could make some recommendations, but they don't. So it's really up to the governor. I wouldn't have too much problem with the drilling that I used to do, the vertical well, except I do have a big problem with the oversight. They're just not on top of it. And I don't know if you've ever been down to Pennsylvania. I've been down a couple of times, and it blew my mind what I saw down in Pennsylvania compared to what I used to do. Well, some people are making a fortune off. If they got a gravel mine, some construction, that'll be temporary, but some people are making a lot of money down there. But that'll probably be fairly short-lived. The pipelines, when I went down a couple of times, I was looking very critically at the pipeline, and I didn't see too bad of scarring, and I didn't see too bad of erosion. Now, there could very well be many places, but what really struck me was the incredible disruption of the truck traffic, the huge size of the well pads that will be there probably. Those well pads, I could see those well pads being there for 20 years as they come in and drill more and more wells, the different horizons from those well pads. Visual blight was unbelievable. You can go on and on about that, but that's been covered by Josh Fox and many others. I'm trying to impress on people the need for funding, whether this goes ahead or not. They're going to need oversight, and the tools that they're talking about using for funding oversight will and have been used against the DEC and the people of the state.
My name is Ellen Harrison. I live in Caroline, New York, and my husband and I signed a gas lease, and that was before we knew about fracking. And when I found out about fracking, I was absolutely horrified, and formed an organization called Fleeced, F-L-E-A-S-E-D. We were fleeced by the gas companies.
And when did you sign your lease?
4.5 years ago.
And so since then, what's happened? What's the story?
Well, at that time, fracking was not being discussed. The gas companies knew about it, but when the landman, the salesman, comes to your door, that's not mentioned. And basically, the salesman gives you a good talk about how it's local energy, and frankly, your neighbors have all signed, so we're going to drill under your land anyway, and blah, 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 blah. So we signed, feeling as though we use this kind of energy, we should not be NIMBY. And then about a year later, the whole concept of what fracking is and involves became known, and I truly didn't sleep for 3 days because I was so horrified. And since then, I realized, if I signed a gas lease, I'm an intelligent person. I'm an environmental scientist. If I signed, I realized almost everybody who signed in ignorance. And people who signed are the ones with the most to lose. People tend to think if you signed a gas lease, you'd be in favor of drilling. But in fact, these bad old leases give the gas companies unbelievable rights to take and use your land, to drill on your land, to potentially pollute your water, but also to, you can't get a mortgage, or getting a mortgage is more expensive because you've signed away some rights in your land. Every time I turn around, I find out more about how horrible it is to have signed a gas lease.
And so what are you going to do now? What's your
the strategy,
plan of action?
The plan of action, first of all, Fleeced is an educational organization. We try to do research to find out what are the implications of having a gas lease and let people with leases know about it, and also to let people who are thinking about signing gas leases know what the pitfalls are. So if you've signed a lease, there really is no way to get out of it. It's a legally binding contract. But it turns out that a lot of leases will be expiring because they were 5-year terms. And at that point, if a lease is expired, you still need to take action to get your land records cleared. It still appears on your title, and so we're helping people with leases that have expired to actually get them terminated.
And so why is it so appealing to sign a lease in the first place when they come to their door? I guess I imagine the idea of a farmer who might not be that great financially, but they have a lot of land that somebody else wants, and
many of the people who signed leases long ago signed for very little money. And even some of the people who signed fairly recent leases signed for very little money per acre. But as you say, there are people who even very little money an acre is important to them. Some leases in Pennsylvania have signed for a lot of money per acre. And certainly if you're a large landholder, that could be a lot of money. So that's one incentive. The other incentives, when it was described to us, they do make a big pitch about how it's American. But one of the things that we have come to realize is many of the leases have actually been sold to other companies. And those companies are in India, China, Norway, Canada. So it's not domestic in that way anymore. We also see that the gas companies are applying for permits on the coasts to liquefy gas, so basically run the gas by pipeline to the coast and then run it through a plant where it becomes liquid and it can then be shipped overseas. Currently, prices for gas in the U.S. are maybe 1/5 of what they are in Europe and Asia. So you do the math. Where's that gas going to go? It's going to go where they're going to make money on it. So incentives were, don't be NIMBY, make some money up front. And then the law in New York is such that if a gas company applies for a permit and they have an area of, let's say, a square mile, they don't have to have the rights to drill on that whole square mile. They only need to have the rights to 60%. The other 40% of the people, 40% of the land, which could be a lot more than 40% of the people, basically their land is taken by eminent domain. Not the surface, but the gas and the underneath. So they basically say, we're going to get your gas anyway. Might as well sign. In New York State, we have been incredibly fortunate that there's been a de facto moratorium in place because the governor a couple of governors ago was persuaded that fracking was a very significantly different than previous gas drilling. So the gas companies say, we've been fracking for years. Well, yes, fracking, which means hydraulic fracturing, has been going on, but it has not been this high volume stuff. So this uses way more water and chemicals and is way bigger impact. So there's been a moratorium in New York, and Governor Cuomo is coming to campus at Cornell today, supposedly, and he has maintained that moratorium, and we're trying to persuade him to keep it in place. That's why we're here.
My name is Jimmy O'Day. I'm a postdoc in chemistry at Cornell. So I have my PhD in chemistry from UC Santa Barbara. I've been in the community for about 2 years and have seen what an issue this is in a place I now call home. And just being a scientist, the evidence is really clear that there's too many cases of fracking contaminating water, contaminating the air, both in terms of ground level ozone, in the methane leaks, and so all the claims of natural gas being a bridge, clean energy bridges are really a moot point with all the methane leaks and the destruction to the water. It's just very clear that the evidence from a scientific standpoint says that fracking is not something we want in our communities, and so that's why I'm here showing my support at this rally. Governor Cuomo has an opportunity to really distinguish himself as a leader, and the rest of the United States could really look to New York as being the place where fracking was told to go away.
And so have you heard about that? There was a recent Stanford study saying that New York could switch to all renewable energy by 2030. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I have heard that. And so my area of research is actually in renewable energy. I study fuel cells and the components in fuel cells, and so I follow this literature. And without a doubt, the technology exists, and when you factor in the subsidies that are given to the oil and gas companies as it is, the economics really become equalized, and renewable energy is really competitive. On a cost-competitive basis, but also just from all of the hidden costs with the destruction and the health consequences associated with fracking. It's really a clear point for me.
Don't frack our water, leave it alone. Don't frack our water, don't frack our water, don't frack our water, leave it alone.
I'm John Armstrong with Frack Action, one of well over 100 concerned citizens who came out to Cornell today to greet the governor to tell him not to frack New York State and instead to pioneer a renewable energy economy across the state that could make New York a national leader in clean energy, efficiency, clean tech, and bring lots of prosperous jobs, good long-lasting jobs, unlike the toxic, mostly out-of-state jobs that fracking would create.
So, if as you say, it would be so easy to just flip the switch and do this, why haven't we done it yet?
Well, there's nothing saying it would be so easy. What we do know is that it's possible and it's necessary. We're on a path with climate change of climate catastrophe. We have to get off of fossil fuels, and renewable energy is a viable option that creates good jobs, harnesses clean energy, and would make a better future for us. We know we have to get there. Why not do it now?
And I guess what's kind of next on the radar here? There are people here today at this kind of small gathering for Cuomo's unexpected visit to Ithaca. But what's next for your group and the other groups who you kind of working with?
I'm really glad you asked. In the immediate future, on Friday, we're actually organizing another rally outside of the governor's fundraiser in Syracuse. If you want to get involved, go to New Yorkers Against Fracking, nyagainstfracking.org. Longer down the road, we're going to be organizing to greet the governor at the State Fair on Governor's Day, August 22nd. But most importantly, people are organizing in every one of their communities across the state to get the word out, to educate people, to get the science heard, and ultimately to build the movement saying no to fracking and yes to renewable energy.
Well, Andrew Cuomo seems to have not made up his mind yet. the protesters here today seem to have come to a very decisive conclusion about what kind of future they want for New York. I'm Chris Knight, WRFI Community Radio News.
Unstoppable, let's take one day.